The US is really, really big, like massive big. Huge and supersized doesn't necessarily mean you need to break the budget next time you decide you're going to travel to the United States of America. In fact, some clever spending decisions can make sure that you stretch your money as far as it can go the next time you decide to go to the US of A. Here's how you're going to do it. How much money you might need in the US for 1 week, 2 week, 4 weeks really depends on the type of traveler you are and the type of traveling preferences you have when you go on holiday. Now, the information I'm about to go through doesn't include the cost of flights to the US. This video is supposed to help you based on the assumption that you've already booked them. Also, unless you're backpacking or solo traveling, you're with another person and you're sharing these costs, however the estimates are per person, just to make it a little bit easier for you to understand. You might also like to try different things compared to average travelers, and that really should inform your decision-making process when you decide how much money you actually want to take or budget when you're visiting the US. Are you there for the massive food and oversized hot dogs and really big refill drinks? Are you visiting for sport? It's got some of the best sporting events in the world. A lot of us go for the nature. They've got incredible diverse landscapes from deserts to mountains to lush tropical forests. It's incredible how much you can do in America. And your choices among these different things really define the costs. Do you want to live on a shoestring or do you want to live like royalty? Traveling to the US at the moment isn't cheap. The Australian dollar, it's not great when you convert it, but there are some savvy choices you can make next time you're visiting America, and hopefully this video helps you budget real wisely. Now, coming from a personal lens, I travel intensely but judiciously. I make my decisions purely based on having the best experiences while I'm in America. My penchant for big American experiences at sporting events or festivals makes me attempt to save a bit more money on accommodation or food when I'm there, because the experiences are what makes my trip more memorable. So here we go. For a 1 week trip, I would be budgeting about $2,000 for your trip. And here's exactly how I'll break it down. Your accommodation. It's often the priciest component of your trip, which is why you book it first and then base everything else around it. Roadside motels can be hit and miss, but also fun. And campsites at the base of mountain ranges or in forests can really make your trip extra special, especially during the summer in the US. So try to look for those if you are trying to stick to a bit of a budget. In order to stick to your budget, consider the mid-range options, and for that you're looking at around $260 to $300 a night for your accommodation. Food. American cuisine is big and is a delightful blend of salty and sweet, and lots of both of those elements. But you might be surprised that it also can be a lot more pocket friendly than if you are in Australia. So daily expenses for food are around only about $50 for the day. A little bit more if you want to indulge for a few extra drinks on top of that. But remember to keep a few extra dollars on top of that for tips. Transport. Unlike Europe or even Australia, most US cities require a vehicle to get anywhere. It's just roads, 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 roads in America. There isn't any trains, there isn't any great public transport unless you're really right in the middle of a city. However, rideshare options like Uber or Lyft are ubiquitous and everywhere. They're also pretty cheap, cheaper than here in Australia. If you're really clever, why don't you hop on one of the many little electric scooters that are all over the cities at the moment. You can find them on city blocks, pretty much in most metropolitan centres, and they're super cheap, and they usually charge based on the kilometre or time. Factoring a little bit of public transport around a place like New York or Chicago, Ubers, Lyfts, daily, you're gonna need in the range of about $25 to get anywhere and really experience the scope and the breadth of a city or a state. Activities, my favorite. The US is teeming with activities. There's never short of something to do anywhere, whether you're in a big city or in the regional areas. There's always something happening. Museums like MoMA, for example, budget about $20. City tours, so we're talking about like walking tours or hop-on, hop-offs, budget about $50. Nature spots. You're going to need to pay to get into some of these places. In some cases, you're going to have to park. You can range from about $0 all the way up to $50. It really depends on what types of state parks or national parks you visit when you're looking for the green stuff. For 2 weeks, I'd suggest doubling your budget to $4,000. Now, it's not always fun to live like a pauper when you're looking for accommodation in the US, because if you book too cheap, things can go really wrong and you can have a really bad overnight experience. So for this adventure, I'd budget a little bit more, stay around the $300 a night mark. Food, also increase your budget a little bit more. You're going to be there for 2 weeks. You've obviously planned this trip to happen for a while. Stick to the $750 to $800 mark for the entire duration of your visit. Allow for treats like food trucks or hot dog stands, about $10 a day. Coffees, they're around $5, $6 in the US, so they're not cheap, but if you go to Starbucks, they're a little bit less. Luxurious dinners are about $65 a head. Again, need to be adding drinks on top of that to make it a worthwhile experience. Now, if you're there for 2 weeks, most likely you're traveling between states. Intercity train rides, like Amtrak, they're about $50 per journey. They're not cheap. Car rides, car rentals, they're about $50 a day. But the good news is petrol is cheap, much cheaper than you're used to in either Europe or Australia. The big activities and attractions, again, I've told you these are my favorite. Just make sure you schedule between about $400 to $500 for your 2-week stay. You have to do a Broadway show if you're in New York, and that's going to cost you at least $100. A baseball game with the Cubs in Chicago or the Phillies in Philadelphia, you're going to need, roughly $125, $130 for a decent ticket to one of these games. Boat tours, Sunset Boat Tour in San Francisco is hard to beat with a glass of champagne. You're going to be budgeting about $50 to $60 for this. Outdoor ventures, again, guided treks, visiting grizzly bears or bike hires. Budget about $40 to $50 a day for these things, or $40 to $50 per experience. Now the big one, the big trip, the one you've been planning forever, the 4-week experience. Now you've most likely been saving for this experience for a while, so I would recommend getting all your dosh and spending at least $8,000 US on a month in the US. It sounds like a lot, but this is most likely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for you, so splurge a little bit. Accommodation for a 1-month trip, I'd budget about half your budget, maybe even a little bit more, on a place to rest your head. Make it nice, make it fun, make sure you pick really cool places that are right in the middle of the city, so you're not having to be on the outskirts of the city and come in, or you're staying in a really crappy roadside motel when you're, in a beautiful part of a state like Montana or Kentucky, for example. Food. You can save a bit of money on food on a trip like this because most likely you are traveling between places. You might even be hiring a car like a camper van, and you're even cooking inside your camper van. However, despite that, have about $1,400 up your sleeve for this particular duration of a trip. Transportation, I'd allocate $400 to $500 of your budget. That's because if you're there for a month, you're most likely not staying in the one state. You're going to be bouncing around quite a bit. The good news is cars and car hire is cheap, as I've said before in the 2-week itinerary, but even better, domestic flights aren't that bad either. Domestic flights are frequent and often, and sometimes as little as $80 to $100 one way. So if you are thinking about going from between Boston and Philadelphia, for example, a drive might take you about 6 hours, but a flight is 1. Think about that for a bit. Activities and attractions. On budget, around about $800. You've got festivals, you've got theme parks like Disney World, you've got specialized workshops or classes when you're visiting cities that are organized through Airbnb. Your experience is nothing without these sort of memories, without going somewhere and experiencing real world America in a place that's been organized and it feels like it's part of an activity that you've saved for and you're going to visit and experience while you're there. So make sure you budget well for this. Now I must stress these are only guidelines. Again, for me personally, I tend to scrimp on food and accommodation so I can really level up my experiences and the types of things I do. So festivals, theater shows, baseball games, they're the things that I love to do. So that's why I really leverage from the activities that I book. Before a bit more of an in-depth read, we've actually written an article exactly about this topic. Visit smoney.com.au and check out the link below in the descriptions, and you'll get a blow-by-blow breakdown of what to do in 1 week, 2 weeks, and 4 weeks on your next adventure to the US. If you love this video, make sure you return and subscribe to S Money's YouTube channel. And if you're even more interested about not just how much money you need in the US, but how to access your money in the US, we've dedicated an entire story and video just to this topic, both online and on this YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.